So I decided to go to the movies today and see Morbius. And I'm one of those people who did like the last two Venom movies. I actually enjoyed both of them. And I'll tell you where this falls when it comes to Sony films, because for people who don't understand, this is under the Sony name and not Disney. There are certain characters that are still under the Sony brand that Disney doesn't own, and Spider-Man is one of those. After this last Spider-Man film, they actually lost the rights to Spider-Man, and it's now back over to Sony. So we're going to see what they do with Spider-Man going forward. And this movie is getting hammered at the box office by critics. If you look at the Rotten Tomatoes score, I think last time I checked, it was 17% of critics gave it a positive rating, and about 70% of the audience gave it a positive rating. And I will tell you, I give it a positive rating, but barely. And honestly, I almost fell asleep watching this movie, and I don't fall asleep at the movies very often. I used to when I had a full-time job, working at Nabisco 8 years ago. That job was all-consuming, and I would fall asleep quite a bit when I would go to the movies late at night. But since I've been a full-time voice actor for the last 8 years, I don't really get tired going to the movies, and I can sit through a movie without dozing off. Well, I came that close to falling asleep at the movie today. Does that mean this is a bad movie? No, it's kind of meh. And here's what I will tell you about well, first of all, let me talk about what the movie's about, a little bit about the plot, and then I'm going to talk about what I had a problem with here and why I'm going to give it the rating I'm going to give it at the end. This movie stars Jared Leto as Morbius, and he's basically an individual who has a rare blood disease, and he has to have his blood switched out 3 times a day to survive. He befriends, it kind of does a flashback, and he befriends this one kid 25 years prior to the events that happen in this film, and they grew up kind of like best friends. And he always swore he would find a cure for both of them, and you find out at the beginning of the movie that he's kind of a genius. And so the movie then goes forward with him finding a cure that, from the trailers, turns him into this part vampire guy. And the way this movie is put together, there's no logic to it, and you can tell that there's been a heck of a lot of stuff cut out of the film because the flow of the movie is way off. It's just really weird. The flow is very bizarre in the way it unfolds, and it's not, I wouldn't call it uncomfortable, but it's just weird. And they jump to things happening so quickly with the characters' motivations and everything else. And so I was left scratching my head at the way this was put together. It should have been a much longer movie and definitely fleshed out what was happening. But they don't. They kind of go at lightning speed, and it just leaves you scratching your head. And they have Tyrese Gibson is in the film as a cop, and he's there with another cop. And you take them out of the movie, and it doesn't really change the movie at all. It's like they're kind of thrown in there in some goofy scenes, and it doesn't really have an effect on the movie at all. And there's just some weird things that happen. And every time they show Morbius, doing his powers, there's like smoke coming off of his body to let you know he's using his powers and some weird things. Now, Morbius is not a bad guy, and they make that clear throughout the movie. But what's interesting is there are some post-credit scenes, and I'm going to talk about this after I give my rating. I'm going to talk about some spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled by the movie, you can hightail it out of here after I give my rating, and I am going to talk about the end and what this means going forward for the Morbius, as a franchise, for Spider-Man as a franchise, and what they are building towards. And it seems to me that this whole movie was a gimmick just to get to the end credit scenes. Now, the movie it's apt, okay? That's the best way I can call it. I can label this film as it's okay. It's not exciting all the time, but it gets the job done. If you've got nothing else better to do and you want to go to the movies, yeah, go see it. At the end of the day, I struggled with either giving this 2.5 or 3 out of 5 stars. I think I'm going to stick with 3 because it's not a terrible movie. It's enjoyable, but I don't think it's as good as the last 2 Venom films, if that kind of gives you a gauge. If you didn't like the 2 Venom films, I don't think you're going to like this. And if you enjoyed the Venom films, know that this is kind of in the same vein, but It's not as humorous, and it's just not as well put together as those films were. So I'm going to get into some spoiler territory. So just be warned now. If you don't want to see spoilers, just leave right now. So at the end of the movie, you find out that Vulture from Spider-Man, the first Spider-Man movie, played by Michael Keaton, gets, because of the rift and things that are going on with the multiverse, he gets thrown into this universe along with Morbius. And I'm assuming this is also where Venom was transferred after the end of the Spider-Man movie. So they're definitely leading this to be a Spider-Man film in the future. And what happens at the end is he teams up with Morbius and says, I think we should create a team. And I'm like, is this what this whole movie was just a gimmick to start the Sinister Six or something? Because, first of all, it wouldn't make sense for Vulture to meet up with Morbius. Morbius is not a bad guy. I don't see why they would team up. It doesn't make logical sense, but there's a lot in this movie that didn't make any sense. They just kind of threw it together. This movie seemed very lazy and just thrown together when it could have been something incredible, but they just cut it down to almost nothing. And at the end of the day, it's almost a snooze fest. But it's not terrible. It's not a bad movie. I actually enjoyed it a lot better than what the critics were making it out to be, but I do give it in the positive category, but barely. So right now, there's not a whole lot to go see, so I'd say if you want to go see Morbius, go ahead and go to the movies. I would try to catch it. I caught it at 10 o'clock my time in the morning, and I would suggest doing that. I wouldn't pay full price at night. I'm glad I didn't. I was going to go with my wife yesterday, and I'm glad I didn't. So it's not terrible, but I can't give it a glowing review. All right, if you guys have seen it, what did you guys think of the film? I don't think it's the dumpster fire that critics are making it out to be. I think they're using Jared Leto as a punching bag. I think every movie he's going to do going forward, he's just going to be the Hollywood punching bag. What do you guys think? I do appreciate all the support. If you guys like the video, please hit that like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and you will be notified as I have new videos go up.